Alright, so for the next synth we're going to make is actually called this Chords. Chords are actually what I developed is a little bit different than what I'm making, and it's usually just chord spreads along with pulverizer and then stereo imager to maximize the sound that it outputs. However, I layered this with the piano to give it some more warmth in that nice glitterness. You'll see what I mean when I play the demo. So let me just remove this and the chords. There we go. Okay, so now have a listen. Okay, so in order to create that kind of angel pad glideness, we're actually going to combine two sounds together to create one. This will become easier as I show it to you. So right click, create a combinator, create a line 62 mixer, and throw in your Thor. Thor is great for achieving those wide, big sounds for pads. So without talking too much about this synth, let's dive on into it. So the first two oscillators that I'm going to need are going to be multi-oscillators. Multi-oscillators are great. They allow you to achieve that big sound without using too many analog oscillators with just the single sign or the single waveform. This takes a bunch of those sounds and run them through and slightly detuning them a bit with this amount knob to give us a much bigger sound. So what we need to do with this synth is that I'm going to take this up at least one octave and I'm going to take this to fifth. Fifth is different than fifth up because fifth up will just add that extra key. Fifth will add a whole major section of the key rather than one. And watch what happens when I take down the amount. Let me take this down. We get a flat signal. So what I'm going to do is run this through with 2. So that way we have our second oscillator and we can start working with it. I'm going to turn it up 1 octave. And I'm also going to take the amount all the way to 0, but I want to set this to a square, and this will give us a much hollow note. Since this is set to fifths, I'm going to set this to fifths up so that way we can add an extra key to this sound. It's much more hollow and much more gritty, thus will work for our pad. So I'm going to take the frequency down a little bit, cut off some more of the highs. So we get 260 for the frequency. I'm also going to turn on my envelope knob all the way up to 64, directly half. I'm also going to turn on my LFO1 and my key tempo sync. So that way when we play any keys, it's going to follow the pitch of those keys. So I want to turn up my rate somewhere to about 1/4. Turn up my keyboard follow so it follows the pitch of the keys. And I'm going to choose the rising up waveform, should be waveform 3. So watch what happens when I start to use the LFO1 source to use the delay dry wet later on in the synth. So let's set that up now. I'm going to choose my LFO1, choose 53 for the amount. Just trust me, this is going to be really, really cool. Delay, dry, wet. Delay, dry, wet. Okay, so in order to achieve more of the sound, sounding more pluck, and in order to give it a little bit more pad-like sound, we need to turn on the chorus to give it some widening. I want to take down the delay so it doesn't ring out too much. So it's much shorter, 2.6 for that, or maybe just like 5.3. Now I'm going to turn up the dry wet to give it some more wetness instead of dry. This is dry, this is wet. Much more wide, perfect for this. Turn on your delay and take down your dry wet to about 27. And I think pretty much everything else where it is perfectly fine. So this LFO one is slowly directing this sound. So what we need to do is have a little bit more power with this synth, but not too much. So I want to turn on my decay to 9.26. And my amp envelope, I want to take that up to -9 decibels, so that way we have more power. Take up your release to give it more padness, 600 milliseconds for that. Padness is really when we play a chord like this, it rings out instead of like a short stab like this. When I go back, I didn't mean to do that. When I go back to 600 milliseconds for the release, it rings out much softer and a little bit better. So what we need to do is turn up the sustain for our filter envelope, since we attach that on to our filter 1 frequency. I'm also going to bring down my decay so we get that pluck to 77 milliseconds, or maybe a little bit more than that, maybe 256. And for the release, take that down to about 1 second. So we get more chord stabs, and that's actually the main of the synth. To tidy up this synth, I want to throw on my pulverizer, turn up the squash a little bit, so probably about 14%. Take your frequency all the way down to 109. Set it to high pass, so that way we remove a lot of the low end. And we're just left with that clean mid. So what I'm going to do next is basically widen this a little bit more. Now you can do this by compressing the signal, but we just did that with the pulverizer, so we don't need to do that extra step. So throw on your stereo imager and your maximizer. The stereo imager really does what it says it does. It widens the signal or sets it to mono, so that way you can solo out one of the frequencies. So I'm going to set this to high band, set this to mono, and turn up your high band wide to about 38. So I'm actually going to set that to normal because the mono sounds perfect where it is. I want to take off the limiter, put release to auto, turn on soft clip, and set the amount to 127. So that way when the signal starts to get too loud, it's going to do this round soft clipping rather than this harsh brick wall. So if you really want to complete the synth, all you have to do is 2 simple steps. Right click on the mixer that you have and throw on an RV7000 Advanced Reverb. The preset I would recommend for this, since we're trying to get more angelic with our pads and our sounds, is to use all treetops. You want to take this dry wet all the way down to about 40. It's just a little bit too powerful. And the high EQ, you want to take that down to 20 as well. Now this is set up for the aux. You can see that by hitting tab. It's all linked up. Alright, now to finalize this synth, right click and create your ID8 instrument. This is one of the newer instruments added to Reason 5 and above, or actually Reason 6 and above. There's another version of Reason called Reason Essentials, and this instrument is included. But all you need to have for this instrument is your grand piano where it is, and make sure to throw on your maximizer and your pulverizer. Turn up the squash to about 22 and set the frequency all the way down to 109. High pass for that. take it off limiter, put release to auto, soft clip the crap out of it. So now when we play those two notes, both of those synths, or actually both of those sounds, are going to play. So if I create two notes, I will put this on C3 and probably D3. So watch what happens when we play both and I start to apply the reverb to the Thor synth and then the reverb to the piano. So I'm going to have this looped over and over again. Let's have a listen. And there you guys have it, your Chords synth pad kind of stabby like sound. I'll see you guys in the next video to finalize the next sound. So stay tuned for that.